Well, our high-rise hotel was just a formality, a required check-in with the government, and after 2 nights, we relocated to Yolan's old apartment that she used to live in. But let me give you the backstory. Yolan divorced 3 years prior to meeting me. But to save face, her and her ex-husband still lived in their condo in a high-rise community they both worked in and shared friends in. Her life was racing too fast, a job that had no breaks, constant social gatherings with coworkers, and endless drinking. And when she finally got home, she locked herself in the bedroom and texted, "Yours truly." And that's how we met. 6 months into our WeChat messaging, she finally moved out and into this place that her sister-in-law bought. Yolan moved her life into these walls. There are still these old photos and clothes that don't fit anymore. Even the gifts I shipped to her are still in some of the drawers. I was here 7 years ago and proposed to her, so coming back was heavy with the memory. This apartment is a perfect symbol of the family cohesiveness in China, which is fundamentally different from the United States. A family operates here like a single body. The pinky toe might be an outlier, but you'd never cut it off. To an American, it might seem a little strange that Yolan's sister-in-law just gives her this 2-bedroom condo. But it's not generosity. It's normal. It's expected. Wealth, property, even kids, they're all communal. The connectivity extends far beyond immediate family to cousins, second cousins, and even those close friends who are given family titles. It's actually really confusing. Let me give you an example. Jie means older sister. Yolan's sister-in-law is simply Jie, even though we're both older than her. Yolan's best friends since childhood are also called Jie. So Yolan's Jie takes care of her Jie, and all the while Yolan's brothers takes care of her parents, even though they're old friends with her Jie. Good luck figuring out which is which. Despite the confusion, the hardest part to really grasp is that blood isn't the only connective tissue at play. Grandma creates law, grandpa enforces the law, culture, family, and expectations set the rules. Each family its own micro-government. You begin to see this most clearly at the dinner table. Families gather around this large circular table with dozens of dishes constantly served. Wuhan's staple, spicy crawfish, became a regular feature. There's constant talking, laughing, and sharing as food swirls past. Then the baijiu breaks out. It's this strong, clear rice wine, 40% alcohol or higher. Bai means white, jiu means alcohol, but it's more about tradition than taste. It bonds people, glasses clink, and shouts of "Ganbei," bottoms up, echo around the table. And I'd sit there smiling, picking at the food, listening to a language I couldn't understand. I looked to Yolan to translate, but she was always too busy talking, breaking apart crawfish to feed herself and me because I wasn't good at breaking apart crawfish. And when her friends laughed and asked, "Ni shi ta de mama ma?" That means, "Are you his mother?" So I had to learn, and eventually I did learn how to crack the shells fast enough to avoid starvation, but what struck me was how different hospitality felt here. They fed me, included me at the table, treated me like I belonged. But conversation, well, that was only for the people who spoke the language. I had my phone ready to translate, Google Translate loaded, and a burning curiosity to learn about them. But no one asked. I wasn't being shut out. I just didn't belong in that space.
他们两个搞么子去了？他两天晚上抽烟。
电子社保卡强发，对。
他不是妹妹。
你现在是哪学校啊？如果你要带我一
没加。
那你帮我把杨回一下。拍完照再看。
And running out of data, the 15 gigs are gone, you're totally cut off. And the isolation became absolute. I couldn't understand what was being said, and I ran out of data. And Yolan, she took me back to China Mobile, but unlike in Shenzhen, there was no special SIM cards for foreigners here. I was firmly planted behind the Great Firewall, and my lifeline to the U.S. totally vanished. Email, WhatsApp, YouTube, they're all blocked. With 3 weeks left in Wuhan, well, I was desperate to connect to home. I pre-installed Nord and ExpressVPNs, but even on the obfuscated settings, well, they were dead on arrival. The panic was real now. My only connection to home was totally gone. I considered hopping a train back to Shenzhen, but finally, after 2 painful and frustrating days of trial and error, I found an open-source VPN that flew under the radar. And I'd also hidden my VPN apps just in case someone from immigration demanded to see my phone. And I'd read that here VPNs are strictly forbidden in China, so each time I clicked that connect button, I started looking around. When a country invests so heavily in blocking your communication, well, you start to kind of feel watched. And you are.
Brown glow. Your voice carries a soft tone. Your nose creases when you smile. But the things that make you unique can also be used to track you. And in China, your appearance, the technology you use, and the sound of your voice are all types of information the Chinese government collects. The scale of this surveillance and the infrastructure supporting it are larger and more elaborate than previously known.
Yolan, sometimes she wouldn't hold hands in public. I went to put my hand on her shoulder and she shrugged it off, just pointing up and whispering, "Camera." The big box was up there with a single black eye looking right at me. Then I started to notice cameras were kind of everywhere. They're on streets, every corner, in every subway car, in every store and park. And there's a camera in every elevator, every restaurant. Shit, I was even wondering if they were in the bathrooms. I found myself walking, though, with this new purpose. I took my hands out of my pockets and made sure I was always smiling. My behavior changed fast. I was performing for the cameras. That behavioral modification wasn't always voluntary. At another giant roundtable dinner with Yolan's best friend, I noticed her husband was once again absent. I wanted to meet him. Too many women at the table. I was convinced that either he didn't want to meet me or that they were potentially having marital problems. So when I finally asked why he didn't show up, her answer kind of shocked me. I didn't believe her, and I had to look up the answer for myself because, well, her reason just seemed so absurd. Hard struggle, thrift, and frugality, a law currently in place that restricts government bank managers or business owners from purchasing luxury goods or attending fancy restaurants. And the idea behind this law is simple. If people have to struggle, well, so should their leaders. Yolan, her friends, and I were enjoying each other's company, and the food was the same old shellfish that I was kind of getting sick of now. The law wasn't preventing her husband from dining. It was actually preventing him from socializing. I understand the need to demonstrate accountability, but at what cost? If a state can control where you eat dinner, what else can it control? I looked up to the ceiling. A camera looked down at me, watching me struggle to crack my goddamn crayfish. 2 days later, though, I was sick. Well, the roundtable dinners and the furious cadence of Chinese often left me in the dark. But my saviors were sometimes the kids, the younger ones who learned English and saw me as a chance to practice. For me, well, they were a lifeline. Yolan's best friend's son was in his 20s and eager to talk, but he was sick, coughing and sneezing. He's a walking petri dish, but I didn't care. It was a relief to have a conversation with someone other than my AI. And the next day, I was the one who was sick. And I stayed under the covers while Yolan took off to meet her friends. I stayed home, binged YouTube with my wonderful VPN, and lived out of the fridge. And I'll admit, it was kind of a nice break wandering around the hot apartment in my tighty-whities, answerable to no one. But this was no ordinary cold. It turned into bronchitis, followed by a nasty sinus infection. And I had to see a doctor. In China, you essentially have three choices: a traditional Chinese doctor, an urgent care clinic, or a full-scale hospital. And it was raining when Yolan took me to see her doctor from when she was a child. We met her mom there. I guess my disease was kind of convenient opportunity for a reunion. And we pulled into an apartment parking lot. No sign of a clinic. We're walking into this condo building, the interior kind of falling apart, bare concrete walls, chipped floors, and a smell of mildew. But at the end of the hall, there's a single closed door, and Yolan knocked, and it opened, and cigarette smoke wafted out of the room. And I walked inside and looked and saw an old woman sitting with an IV in her arm, watching a kung fu TV show on a big screen. And I was gestured to sit down at this mahjong table littered with dirty ashtrays and open beer cans. So I shot Yolan a look of pure terror, and she assured me that he's a good doctor. So the three of us talked, and they reminisced, and I sat there just dying. I handed him my phone with my symptoms and usual prescriptions, and he shook his head because he didn't carry any antibiotics. I'd never been so relieved to be denied treatment. So we left this medical establishment and drove to a real urgent care. It wasn't the sanitized, sterile clinic you might find in the U.S., but it was clean and efficient. Rows of chairs lined the back of the room, and I was quickly diagnosed and prescribed medicine. So they hooked me up to an antibiotic IV. It took me 2 hours for the bag to drain, and in the meantime, Yolan ran out and came back with breakfast, a traditional dry, spicy noodle, which was my favorite. It's a spicy sesame peanut noodle with a side of steam buns. It's a ton of food, and it costs a whopping $2. So finally, after the visits and 6 long hours of IV drips, the infection was gone. There was something reassuring, though, about having daily care versus a prescription of pills. My wife, my Jia, and my nephew were there keeping me company, but why the IV? Why not take home prescription? In China, IVs are the norm and not the exception. After my last treatment before leaving, I stocked up on medications that would cost me hundreds back home with insurance. But here, $50, no prescription needed. Chinese food culture is more than eating. It's actually kind of a performance. The tables are huge and round, covered in food, some familiar like ribs and crawfish, others I'd never seen. Liver, dried fish, bitter melon, duck tongue, and the lazy Susan starts spinning. And as the only American there, most of these people had never met one, and I was being watched. The table would stop, and a dish landed in front of me. An old lady across the table nodded, "Changshi," which means try it. And even before I could reach out and get one, a server placed a fork and spoon in front of me, no chopsticks, and I was the only one. Yolan had to tell them I could use chopsticks, and asked for a pair, and bam, the test was on. I grabbed a rib with my chopsticks and set it in my bowl, then I picked it up with my hands to eat it. Right? It's a rib. So napkins are flying at me from across the table. Everyone's staring. The same old lady had another napkin cocked and loaded. And Yolan said, "They think it's funny you're eating with your hands." She demonstrated the correct way, using chopsticks to strip the meat clean. Her bone looked like it had been picked by piranhas. Mine, fat, tendon, all left behind. Her friend pointed at my bones and told Yolan that if I don't like the food, that they can order me something more American. And I told Yolan to tell them to just let me eat already. She smiled at them instead and made an excuse for me. And the dinners were beginning to feel a little bit more intrusive than the cameras on the ceiling. But there's one test I couldn't avoid. Baijiu. Remember, it's that strong-ass 40% alcohol. And drinking it, it's not about the drink, it's about tradition, about bonding and friendship. And when the bottle comes out, glasses are filled, and someone raises theirs and shouts "Ganbei," well, you drink. You can't decline. Because declining isn't refusing a drink, you're refusing a friendship. It started with Yolan's father, a home-cooked feast, poured cups of baijiu, drinking until we were both drunk. My bad Chinese got worse, but we laughed, and it felt like bonding. But it didn't stop. The next day, baijiu at lunch. That night, more at dinner. By the third day, well, I had had enough. I wasn't just tired of drinking. I was also watching Yolan slip back into the patterns she left China to escape in the first place. At another dinner, everyone was sober except her and her dad. And I watched them drain glass after glass. Her friends laughed and talked. I sat there watching my wife disappear into this version of herself that I didn't even recognize anymore. And here's where it got impossible. In America, I'm her partner, her equal. When she's in trouble, I step in. That's just what a husband does. But in China, her dad still makes the rules. He's pouring the drinks. He's leading the toasts. And if I intervene, if I tell her to stop, if I protect her from him, I'm not being a good husband. I'm disrespecting her father, which shames her in front of her entire family. And there's just no way to win. Either I watch her get pulled back into the life she escaped, or I disrespect her father and humiliate her in front of everyone she grew up with. So, back at the apartment, we fought. And she was angry because, well, it's a special occasion. But I've been hearing that for days. I gave her an ultimatum finally. Either the drinking stops or I'm on the next flight home. So that night, I understood something. You can leave China, but it doesn't leave you. And for people caught between these two worlds, there's no version of yourself that can satisfy everyone. And for the next dinner, I had prepared a speech. And you can't approach this like an American. In America, we speak for ourselves. In China, the self means nothing. You speak for family. My Chinese was terrible, but Yolan helped me practice. So at dinner, I stood up. I thanked everyone for welcoming me, for treating me like family. Then I sat down and raised my cup filled with tea. Ganbei, baba. Oh, you're still here. Well, why don't you hit that like button and subscribe while you're at it? It goes a long way, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one.